Life of David Livingston, Part 32. Part 32. Another thing which specially attracted my attention was the wonderfully retentive memory. When we returned, the 30 years and more he had spent in Africa, deprived of books, we may well think it an uncommon memory that can recite whole poems of Byron's, Burns, Tennyson, Longfellow, even the poets Whittier and Lowell were far better known to him than me. He knew the endless number of facts and names and persons connected with America much better than I, and though it was my particular province as a journalist to have known them. Dr. Livingston is a truly pious man, a man deeply imbued with real religious instincts. The study of the man would not be complete if we did not take a religious side of his character into consideration. His religion, any more than his business, is not of the theoretical kind, simply connecting itself with avowing its particular creed or ignoring all other religions as wrong or weak. It is of the true particular kind, never losing a chance to manifest itself in a quiet, practical way, never demonstrative or loud. It is always at work. It is not, if not indeed, by shining example. It is not aggressive, which sometimes is troublesome and often impertinent. In him, religion exhibits its loveliest features. It governs its conduct towards his servant, towards the natives, towards the bigoted Muslims, all who come in contact with him. Without religion, Livingston, with his ardent temperament, his enthusiastic nature, his high spirit and courage, might have been an uncompanionable man and a hard master. Religion has tamed all these characteristics. Nay, it has even possessed of them, and they have been thoroughly eradicated. Whatever that was crude or willful, religion has redefined and made in him, to speak the earnest, sober truth, the most agreeable of companions and indulgent of masters. Every Sunday morning he gathers his little flock around him, and his prayers read in the tone recommended by Archbishop Whately, natural, unaffected, and sincere. Following them, he delivers a short address in the Kisawahili language about what he has been reading from the Bible to them, which is listened to with great attention. When I first met the doctor, I asked him if he did not feel a desire to visit his country and take a little rest. He had then been absent about 6 years, and the answer he gave me freely shows what kind of man he is. He said, "I would very much like to go home and see my children once again, but I cannot bring my heart to abandon the task that I have undertaken when it is so nearly completed. It only requires 6 or 7 months more to trace the true source of what I have discovered with Peternick's branch of the White Nile, or what Albert Nyanza or Sir Samuel Baker. Why should I go before my task is ended? I have to come back again and to do what I can do very well now. And why, I asked, did you come so far back without finishing the short task which you said you have yet to do? Simply because I was forced. My men would not budge a step forward. They mutinied and formed a secret resolution that if I insisted on going on, to raise a disturbance in the country, and after they had effected to abandon me, in which case I should be killed, it was dangerous for me to go any further. I had explored 600 miles of the watershed, had traced all the principal streams which discharged their waters into the central line of drainage, and when about starting to explore the last 100 miles, the hearts of my people failed, and they set about frustrating me in every possible way. They set about frustrating me in every possible way. Now, having returned 700 miles to get a new supply and stores and another escort, I find myself destitute of even the means to live but for a few weeks, and sick in my body and mind." Again, about a week after I had arrived in Ujiji, I asked Livingston if he had examined the northern head of the Tanganyika. He answered immediately that he had not, and had asked the people expected, and then asked if people expected that he had, I did try before setting out for Manyema, he said, to engage canoes and proceed northward, but I soon saw that the people were all confederating to fleece me as they had Burton, and had I gone under such circumstances, I should not have been able to proceed to Manyema to explore the central line of drainage, and of course, the most important line, far more important than the line of the Tanganyika, for whatever connection there may be between Tanganyika and the Albert, the true source of the Nile are those emptying into the central line of drainage. In my own mind, I have not the least doubt that the Rutsitsi River flows from this lake into the Albert. For 3 months steadily, I observed a current setting northward. I verified it by means of water plants. When Speke gives the altitude of the Tanganyika at only 1,880 feet above the sea, I imagine he must have fallen into the error by frequently writing the Anno Domini, and thus made a slip of the pen. Oh, like 1880. For the altitude is over 2,800 feet by boiling point, though I make it a little over 3,000 feet by barometers. Thus you see that there are no very great natural difficulties on the score of altitude, and nothing to prevent the reasonable supposition that there may be water connections between the Rutsitsi and some other river between the two lakes. Besides, the Arabs here are divided on their statements. Some swear that the river goes out of the Tanganyika, others that it flows into the Tanganyika. Dr. Livingston left the island of Zanzibar March 1866. On the 7th and following month, he departed from Mikadinini Bay for the interior with an expedition consisting of 12 sepoys from Bombay, 9 men from Johanna and of the Comoro Islands, 7 liberated slaves and 2 Zambezi men, 6 camels, 3 buffalo, 2 mules, and 3 donkeys. He thus had 30 men, 12 of whom the sepoys were to act as guards for the expedition. They were most likely armed with the Enfield rifles presented to the doctor by the Bombay government. The baggage of the expedition consisted in 10 bales of cloth and 2 bags of beads, which were to serve as currency by which they would be enabled to purchase the necessary necessities of life in the countries the doctor intended to visit. Besides the Comboros monkeys, they carried several boxes of instruments such as chronometers, air thermometers, sextant, artificial horizon, boxes containing cloths, medicines, personal necessaries. The expedition traveled up the left bank of the Rovuma River, a route as full of difficulties as any that could be chosen. For miles, Livingston and his party had to cut their way with their axes through the dense and most impenetrable jungles which lined the riverbanks. The road was a mere footpath leading in the most erratic fashion in and through the most dense vegetation, seeking the easiest outlet from it without any regard to the course it ran. The pagazis were able to proceed easily enough, but the camels, on account of their enormous height, could not advance a step without the axes of the party first clearing the way. These tools of foresters were almost always required, but the advance of the expedition was often retarded by the unwillingness of the sepoys and Johanna men to work. Soon after the departure of the expedition from the coast, the murmurings and complaints of these men began, and upon every occasion and every opportunity they evinced a decided hostility to the advance. The doctor and his little party arrived on the 18th day of July, 1866, at a village belonging to a chief of the Maya, situated 8 days' march south of the Rovuma and overlooking the watershed of the Lake Nyasa. The territory lying between the Rovuma River and the Mahaya chieftain was an uninhabited wilderness, lying at during the transit of the of which Livingston had the expedition suffered considerably from hunger and desertion of men. Early in August 1866, the doctor came to Mponda's country. A chief who dwelt near the lake Nyassa. On the road thither, two of the liberated slaves deserted him. Here also, Wakatani, a portage of the doctor, insisted upon his discharge, alleging as an excuse, which the doctor subsequently found to be untrue, that he had found his brother. Hence the explorer proceeded to the heel of Lake Nyassa, where there is a village of a Basia chief. The chief was ill. The doctor Livingston remained there for some time to give him medical aid. It was here that he was deserted by his Joanna men, and chief of whom, Ali Musa, pretended to give credence to a mournful story of plunder perpetuated upon certain half-caste Arab who had been along the western shore of the lake. Though the explorer gave no faith to the Arab story, he determined not to go among the Matsitu reported so hostile, and proceeded in the southwestern course for a considerable distance. The correspondent's letter goes on to say, as soon as he turned his face westward, Mutsa and the Joanna men ran away in his body. The doctor says, in commenting upon Musa's conduct, that they felt strongly tempted to shoot Mutsa and another ringleader, but was nevertheless glad that he did not soil his hands with the vile blood. A day or two afterwards, another of his men, Simon Prince by name, came to the doctor with some tale about the Matsu, but compelled by the scant number of his peoples to repress all such tendencies to desertion and faint-heartedness, the doctor shut him up at once and forbade him to utter the name of the Matsitsu any more. Had the natives not assisted him, he must have deprived of ever being able to penetrate a wild and unexplored interior which he was now about to tread. Fortunately, as the doctor says with unction, I was in a country now, after leaving the shores of the Nyassa, where the feet of the slave trader had not trodden. It was a new and virgin land, and of course, as I had always found in such cases, the natives were really good and hospitable, and for very small portions of cloth my baggage was conveyed from village to village by them. In many other ways, the traveler in his extremity was kindly treated by undefiled and unspoiled natives. On leaving his hospitable region in the early part of December 1866, the doctor entered a country where the Matsitsu had exercised their customary spoliating propensities. Land was spent, clean of all provisions and cattle, and the people had emigrated to other countries beyond the borders of these ferocious plunderers. Again, the expedition was besieged by famine and was reduced to great extremity. To satisfy the pinching hunger it suffered, it had recourse to the wild fruits which some parts of the country furnished. At intervals, the condition of the hard-pressed band was made worse by the heartless desertion of some of the members, and more than once departed with the doctor's personal kit, changes of clothes and linen. With more or less misfortunes constantly dogging his footsteps, he traversed in safety the countries of the Babisa, Babemba, Barungu, Baulungu, and Landa. In the country of the Landa lives a famous Kanzembe made known to Europeans first by Dr. Lacerda, the Portuguese traveler. Kazembe is a most intelligent prince, is tall, stalwart man who wears a particular kind of dress made in crimson print in the form of a prodigious kilt. The mode of arrangement is most ludicrous. All the folds of the enormous kilt are made in front, which causes him to look as if the particularities of the human body were reversed in his case. The abdominal parts are thus covered with a balloon-like expansion of cloth, while the lumbar region, which is by us jealously clothed with him, is only half draped by a narrow curtain, which by no means suffices to obscure its naturally fine proportions. In this state dress, King Kazembe received Dr. Livingston, surrounded by his chiefs and bodyguards, a chief who had been deputed by the king and elders to find out all about the white man, then stood up before the assembly and in a loud voice gave the result of the inquiry he had instituted. He had heard the white man had come to look for waters, for rivers and seas, though he did not understand what the white man could want with such things, and had no doubt that the object was good. Then Kazembe asked the doctor, proposing what proposed doing and where he thought of going. The doctor replied that he had thought of going south, and he had heard of lakes and rivers being in that direction. Kazembe asked, "What can you want to go there for? The water is close here. There is plenty of large water in this neighborhood." Before breaking up the assembly, Kazembe gave orders to let the white man go where he would through the country, undisturbed and unmolested. He was the first Englishman he had seen, and said that he liked him. Shortly after this introduction to the king, the queen entered the large house surrounded by a bodyguard of Amazons armed with spears. She was a fine, tall, handsome young woman, and evidently thought she was about to make a great impression upon the rustic white man, for she had clothed herself after a most royal fashion, and was armed with a ponderous spear. But her appearance, so different from what the doctor had imagined, caused him to laugh, which entirely spoiled the effect intended. For the laugh of the doctor was so contagious that she herself was the first who imitated, and the Amazons, courtier-like, followed suit. Much disconcerted by this, the queen ran back, followed by her obedient damsels, to retreat most indignified and unqueen-like, compared to the majestic advance to the doctor's presence. Soon after his arrival in the country of Lunda, or Lunda, and before he had entered the district of Kazembe, he had crossed the river called the Chambetsi, which was quite an important stream. The similarity of the name with the large and noble river south, which will be forever connected with his name, misled Livingston at the time, and he accordingly did not pay the attention that it deserved, believing that the Kambezi was but a headwater of the Zambezi, and consequently had no bearing or connection with the source of the river to Egypt, of which he was in search. His fault was in relying too implicitly upon the correctness of Portuguese information. This error cost him many months of tedious labor and travel, but these travels and tedious labors of his in Landa and the adjacent countries have established beyond doubt, first, that the Chambezi is a total distinct river from the Zambezi of the Portuguese, and secondly, that the Chambezi, starting from about the latitude 11 degrees south, is none other than the most southerly feeder of the great Nile, thus giving this famous river a length of 2,600 miles of direct latitude, making it second to the Mississippi, the longest river in the world. The real and true name of the Zambezi is Dambatsi. When Lacunda and his Portuguese successors came to Kanzembe, crossed the Chambezi, and heard the name, they very naturally set it down as our own Zambezi, and without further inquiry sketched it as running in that direction.